Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in again. Remember, this is George.
Hey, everybody. Oh, yes, okay, to the other hand, okay?
Okay, man.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I hope you enjoy the show, okay?
And this is Cerberus. See, Cerberus only gets like 1 day to rest. That's the day after Halloween. Sorry, you go ahead and get some rest.
Yeah, dog. You get some rest. Leave the smart stuff up to us guys, okay?
I don't think you know, you're smart. It doesn't take a genius to walk over the gates of hell, okay? Right. Oh yeah, so why we're here? We're here to basically talk about the rise of Rome. And this guy called Julius Caesar. Now, Julius Caesar, he invented the sun calendar. He literally transformed astronomy. So he was a pioneer of astronomy, a pioneer of math, a pioneer of democracy. But his big thing was the sun calendar. Because what basically they did was they indoctrinated, before that they had the moon calendar, which was indoctrinated for like 4,000 years or whatever. The dawn of civilization basically lived off the moon calendar, and they lived off the moon calendar because their eyes weren't quite, see, the sun was there, but they couldn't quite see the sun. They were always looking down, and the only time they could look up was at night when the moon was there, because their eyes were not adjusted to the sun. And they really didn't, our eyes didn't really adjust to the sun until around this time that Julius Caesar's invented the sun calendar. And we were able to actually fully walk upright and see. See, because this whole thing about how we were crunched over, I mean, actually, slowly, we're able to straighten out our backs. But this was because our eyes couldn't handle the sun. So we were always down and crawling, and eventually as our eyes adjusted. And then they indoctrinated the sun calendar, and they added like 100 and some odd days to the year. And this all happened around the time of Christ, where they were going to indoctrinate the sun calendar. So whether it's a coincidence or whatnot, people could see the sun, fully see the sun. Jesus showed up. They're confusing things. Oh, God must be here. We can see the sun. Anyway, so they indoctrinate this sun calendar. And upon his death, see, before he died, he had to come up with an heir to the throne, but he had no children. And the only children he had was a daughter with Cleopatra. So he ended up adopting Germanicus. And Germanicus basically became the general of the Roman army. And then before Julius Caesar died, the thing with Germanicus is that he was actually Nordic. See, Caesar basically signed a peace treaty with the Nordic people. And part of this peace treaty was to adopt a child from the warring tribe that you're now declaring peace with. You adopt a child. They'll adopt a Roman, you adopt a Nord. So he was actually a Nordic from Viking descent, Scandinavian origins. They want you to think he's Roman and stuff, but really he's a Scandinavian. And all Germanic means is not German or not Roman. That's what Germanicus means. It means not Roman. Anyway, Caesar conquered the Holy Land. He liberated Egypt. So the Holy Land and that whole area was basically under Roman authority and rule. Now, before his death, no one liked the idea of a Viking being emperor, because they were basically found Rome. They're indoctrinating this calendar. And basically, he then goes out and adopts a Roman child, Tiberius. And after Caesar's death, Tiberius becomes emperor. Now, during this time, Germanicus was the general of the Roman army. And all the conquering that went on during that time, Germanicus was responsible for it. And then one year, about 12 AD or so, Tiberius refuses to pay Germanicus war retributions. So Germanicus declares himself emperor, and he marches on Rome. He convinces the army to back him, and he marches on Rome. So a census is called, and everyone has to leave Rome that wasn't born in Rome out of fear of foreign espionage, because that's what happens when you have a civil war. So they talk a lot about Jesus and the formation of the church, but really it was also the formation of Rome. And if you're under civil war, the chances of foreign espionage go through the roof. So they call a census and they tell everyone to go home. Go back to the city of the country of your birth. We have to gather up all your names, because that's what happens when a civil war happens. And Germanicus has decided that he's just going to declare himself emperor and march on Rome. Of course, he's my ancestor, good old Germanicus. But part of the civil war, it ended, and Tiberius, basically for part of his war retributions to Germanicus, gave him what we know as modern-day Germany. So Germany was named after this guy, Germanicus. And he had a child, Caligula. Now, Caligula was Lord during the time of Christ. Now, all Lord means is the guy who's next in line to become emperor. So Caligula was Lord, and Jesus was his king. And because he conquered the Holy Land. You don't think Caligula or Germanicus or Tiberius that the emperor knew what was going on in the Holy Land? Oh, he was off in Rome. They were having a party. So that's basically what we're here just to talk about Julius Caesar. Really, I don't want to get into the whole thing. We all know. Anyways, just a brief history of Julius Caesar. He invented the sun calendar. He was the godfather of astronomy, mathematics, and democracy. He conquered the Holy Land. He liberated Egypt. He signed a peace treaty with the Nordic people. He adopted Germanicus, a Nordic son. Became the head of the Roman army, Germanicus. The Roman people didn't like the idea of a Viking being in charge of Rome, so he adopted Tiberius. Tiberius became emperor, decided that he wasn't going to pay this guy money for war retributions. And in the end, Tiberius dies and Caligula actually becomes emperor. And then after the crucifixion of Christ, what does he do? He beheads Herod Antipas, the very guy who beheaded John the Baptist. Now, if you look in the history books, they'll say that Caligula exiled Herod Antipas. But whether he was exiled or beheaded, Caligula is the great redeemer. He was the one who punished the evil king in the story. Like, you really have to have a history book next to your Bible. All I do is I take Old King James, I take New Roman Catholic, I read them both. So while you guys are like all hooked into one Bible or a Quran or whatever it is, I got to read two books at the same time. Then I have to go through every stanza and point out all the differences in grammar. and what that really means to the narrative, and how these two books are actually projecting two separate narratives. In fact, there are four narratives. If you really look in the Bible, it comes down to the Spirit, because the first differentiation is the Spirit. One is spelt with a capital S, one is spelt with a lowercase s. So unless they agree, I have to say, okay, well, all I'm asking now is the Spirit a person, place, or thing? So that's your four possible narratives going on in the Bible. And then, while I'm doing this, they'll mention historical figures. So I'll look up historical figures. They mention Caesar, so I look up Caesar. They mention Herod the Great, so I look up Herod the Great. Oh, what do you know? This guy's the architect of the Holy Land. He built the place. Book of Matthew introduces him. He chases little baby Jesus all the way to Egypt. I don't know. I'm just here to say a brief history. A brief history of how Rome rised. And remember, this is how we couldn't adjust the sun. We came out of the ocean. The sun was like, at night we could look up and see the moon. So we created a calendar and a system based on the moon. But once we saw past the moon and we became upright, we could now look into the sun. We still can't stare into the sun. We'll go blind. So in truth, Jesus was the first crucifixion seen by all who could stand upright. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in.